Hi guys, Jonathan Ferguson here in the museum stores, as always with an interesting firearm to show you. This is a rifle, of course. Well, I say of course, you don't know that, but it is. A military rifle. It's got a bayonet lug on the end. We don't have the bayonet that goes with this, very regrettably. We'll have to remedy that at some point. Big old copper tag hanging off it, which is or bronze, I think, which is a bizarre legacy of our collection. Things were identified in various different ways in the past, and big, heavy bronze tags was one of them. Very regrettably, these circles stamped into the woodwork are some other means of identifying, I think, foreign weapons when this was sort of a reference collection at the Tower of London. And these horrible tags nailed in. Full disclosure, we did not become a proper museum until 1983. And before that, unfortunately, anything went from soldiers polishing beautifully decorated armour down to the bare metal, which we know happened, to nailing stuff into what would become very significant historic arms. But when this was done, this was perhaps 20 years old. So they had it as an example of what other states were using. Now, why am I wittering on about that? Well, the other state in question here is Bavaria, because this is the Werder single-shot breech-loading rifle introduced in 1869, just in time for the Franco-Prussian War, into which Bavaria was sort of thrown, having allied itself with Prussia. This is before, of course, Germany becomes Germany. It's pretty standard stuff for a military rifle, firing by this point, a brass-cased, self-contained cartridge, but a big, heavy, slow, unjacketed bullet, in this case 11 millimeters. So the initial chambering for this, which you can spot by virtue of these dinky little, almost Enfield P53 style rear sights, is the 11 by 50 Werder cartridge. Invented by Johann Ludwig Werder, around about 1868, as far as I know. Werder was, I believe, of Swiss extraction, but was living and working in Bavaria, and like any European power at the time, Bavaria didn't know the future, didn't know it was going to become part of the greater Prussian Empire / Germany, and that there would be a standard rifle, which was the Mauser 1871, of course. Didn't know any of that, and had a lot of national pride and wanted to develop its own system, as most nations did. This was based upon the Peabody dropping block, and you can see the family resemblance, not with the big humpback here, but with the dropping block. And when I operate that for you in a moment, you'll understand what I mean. But with a fairly major twist. So far, so ordinary. But the way you'd load this, and sadly I don't have an inert round of the correct caliber, you start with the block dropped, rather than dropping it by operating a lever, as with the Martini, for example, which is also derived from the Peabody falling block, tilting block system. Rather than do that, you would start in the open condition, insert a cartridge, cock it to both cock the weapon and close the breech block, so there's not a separate lever for that. Well, there isn't on the Martini, to be fair. So that's in the cocked condition, the block is now closed, the cartridge is chambered. You fire it, which I will do just the once. Gun goes bang, rifle goes bang. You don't then immediately cock it to open up the breech, because it doesn't open up the breech at this point. We can even try and do that. Doesn't open it. You do that all day long, won't open the breech block. That's what what looks like a backwards trigger, that's what that's for. So that's in its fired state. We would then thumb the front trigger, and that magically drops the block, which operates the extractor and hurls the case out with quite a bit of force. At this point, I will recommend the Bloke on the Range channel, with Bloke and Chap, excellent channel anyway, but definitely check out their Werder videos. In particular, the Mad Minute that they did not so long ago, where there's a lot of rapid fire going on, and you can see the advantage of a weapon that will throw out a cartridge case almost like a self-loading rifle will. In that case, it's because the next round's going to get slammed into the chamber, and you've got to make sure you've got a reliable extraction and ejection system. Here, it's more of a luxury item, where it means you're speeding up your manual reloading time. We've seen the Snyder, or you've seen the Snyder, we've seen the Tabatier in a previous video. Those, same with the Springfield to a great extent, those rely on sort of muscle power as to how energetically the empty cartridge case comes out of the gun. You've really got to assist them. You've got to give it welly to get it out of there. And in the case of the Snyder, you've definitely got to flip the whole gun over to tip it out. None of that with this. Really quite a slick system. It's maybe a little heavy, a little extra heavy because of it, but you probably wouldn't notice as a soldier. It will probably, or well, certainly be more costly than something like a Snyder or a Tabatier or a Springfield, because there's quite a lot of intricate parts machined in here. Check out the other Bloke on the Range videos for really nice demonstrations of how the mechanism comes apart, and then they put it back together with a clear plate so you can see exactly what's happening when it's operated. So just to briefly summarize the different variants of this, there are three, as far as I know. This is the original, as mentioned, and it has a very traditional sort of rifle musket style rear sight with a slider, allows you to choose the initial ranges. It's not a million miles away from a modern sight in that respect, but it folds the other way, and that's because of this generation, for the longer ranges, you're flipping it up. And it's marked on there up to an astonishing 1,200 meters. Now with this slow, heavy bullet, that's describing quite the ballistic arc, but you can still lob shots in at, I don't know, artillery emplacements, groups of infantry, things like that. So this is the original version. Following the Franco-Prussian War and adoption of the 1871 Mauser across all the German states, these remained in service as sort of second-line reserve type rifles, and two different conversions were performed. So there's the Aptiert modification, where they are rechambered for the 11x60 cartridge. I actually do have an inert example here. It looks very much like a Martini cartridge, a little slimmer. And then the version I don't have to show you here today is the Royal Model NM, which is where they replace the whole barrel with that of the Mauser 1871. So keeping these things in service. So you keep the action, you keep the stock, you save money, but you rebarrel them. They probably need rebarreling by this point anyway, if they've seen heavy use, as some of them would have done. And then you can take advantage. It's more convenient now that you've produced a load of 1871 Mauser barrels to just slap those on these, rather than alter the chambers on the existing rifles. At least that's my estimation of why they did it. And the rear sight on the modified versions is this big chunky thing. Sighted to the same ranges. That one's a bit stiff. I won't force it. It actually has different apertures. Bottom one, middle one, and top one, and then a folding leaf on the back here, and then a fixed one there, giving you all the different battlefield ranges that you would need. And this is simply because the ballistic trajectory of the 11x60 cartridge, invented for the 1871 Mauser, is different than the Werder. So they've had to compensate for that with different sighting. So without enough of these things available, most of the armed forces of Bavaria that entered the Franco-Prussian War did so with the 1858, modified in 1867, Podewils, forgive my pronunciation, -Lindner. So the Podewils was their muzzle loading system, akin to the Pattern 53 for Britain. The Lindner modification was a breech-loading conversion, but unfortunately it was the old technology of what we call a capping breech loader. So it's still percussion cap fired. this is a fascinating time in history because you've got people going to war with such a range of different technology, from muzzle loaders to percussion cap breech loaders like the Lindner, to like slightly old hat needle rifles like the Dreiser, to the latest needle gun, the Chassepot, and the Tabatier with its modern metallic cartridge system, but it's a cheap conversion of existing rifles. So there's all sorts on the battlefield at this time, which I think makes it fascinating. So we've chosen this system to talk about today specifically because we've collaborated again with the guys over at Real Time History, who've done some amazing work just generally. But at the moment, they are doing a series on the Franco-Prussian War. So link in the description there to go and check them out. Please do so. A very short version of this will appear, just for lack of time, over on their channel as well. But we thought we'd give you a deeper dive over here and also pose our usual question over on social media of what is this weapon? So congratulations as ever to those of you who did come to us via that route and did guess what it was. As ever, we have links in the description for donations if you'd like to donate to the Royal Armouries. My book on rather more modern firearms than this, although it does pick up in 1902, my British Bullpups book is available from the Royal Armouries shop if you'd care to go and have a look at that. No pressure. Please do come and visit one of our 3 sites here in the UK if you're able to. Otherwise, guys, I will see you again next time. Thank you very much for watching.